Look at this flat, chunky boy. I love this. I'm not even kidding. I grabbed Weaponizer Bumblebee on a pseudo whim after plenty of eBay hunting for one that wasn't $50 or missing its head. Why do so many of them lose their heads? And I have to say, he's been quite the pleasant surprise. I know I looked at first edition Bumblebee in the past, and I wasn't very fond of the mold, and I'm still not. But while this is a Prime Bee, it's definitely not that figure, thank goodness. Now, yes, this car mode is a little wonky, and it is a little wedge-shaped if you look at it from the side and squint a bit. There also aren't any side windows, which is fine for the robot mode, but in vehicle mode it just gives you a clearer view of all the robot junk crammed in there. I kind of feel like windows that could fold down would have been nice, but maybe there wasn't a way for them to do that with the budget they were given, I don't know. Aside from that, my only other complaints about this car mode is the way the black stripes are interrupted around the door hinges, which is probably because it's unpaintable plastic or something, and also the obvious yellow clips in the middle of the front wheels. I'm not terribly bothered by either of these things, and I can fix them both with a little bit of time and paint if I really wanted to, but they're there. And they seem to be a common complaint among other folks who've had this guy, or looked at pictures and complained on TFW. That sure does happen a lot, doesn't it? Even with those nitpicks, I do still enjoy this car mode, though. It's not quite as big and beefy as Beast Mode Bumblebee, but it's a lot sleeker and does something arguably even cooler than having a bird pop out of his chest and sprouting wings. Maybe not as metal, though. This car mode looks even smaller next to Power Charge Bumblebee, but that thing's kind of an unholy beast that I like because it looks cool and is fun, but also kind of hate because it's too big to comfortably fit on my designated Autobots shelves. Also, I still don't like the brown plastic they used for the torso, but we're talking about Weaponizer Bee. Maybe compared to those other two, the sheer size of this thing may not be enough to be considered a gimmick, but when you look at it in the context of more typical mainline stuff like Deluxes and Voyagers, it does kind of work as its own thing, just being big. And of course, it's suitably large next to the duck tank. But the real trick to this toy is under the hood, literally. Push the engine block, or whatever it is, and flip out spinny guns! It's very simple at its core, but I really do love this gimmick. It's fun to set off, and it's really cool how the guns keep spinning for a little while after they flip around. Even resetting the gimmick is actually pretty neat. You push this extremely dull gray lever in the middle of the hood, and it flips the guns back inside. The headlights even glow red when you do it for some reason, but only for a minute. You kind of have to time it just right to be able to see it, and it's not showing up in these lights. There we go, you can kind of see the dull red glow. It does that. You can also reset the guns using a lever in the bumper that's meant for robot mode, which is a little awkward compared to the lever anyway, but I do like that you have options. You just kind of have to get a nail in there and then pull that down, and there you go. And then flip it back up. I also like having options because if I ever decide to cut down this gray lever to clean up the hood and subsequently the robot mode chest, I'll still have a way to reset the gimmick. Alright, now before we transform Bumblebee into a humanoid Bumblebee, I do have a Coffee and a Patreon, links to both at the end of this video, at the end card, as well as down in the description. Otherwise, typical YouTube stuff of like, comment, share, subscribe is much appreciated. Now, the transformation on this guy does some pretty interesting stuff. First off, going to pop open the doors, because of course we are. And then you want to unplug all this stuff back here, because as you might expect, the back part of the car is like the whole top of the car, or almost whole top of the car is just going to be a backpack. You want to pull this narrow section up, and I find the easiest way to do that is to just move this out of the way, which is much easier to do when the guns aren't engaged, because it's like, since this lever is what moves the guns, when the guns are tucked away, there's nothing keeping it pressed down like this, so you can just easily move that down. But anyway, you want to get a thumb up here and just pop that up. And with this popped up, now we can push up on these little off-color yellow pieces on the sides here to unplug them from right behind the wheel wells, and then this entire assembly comes up like this. And you want to rotate it around so that this piece kind of feeds through the gray bit there, and it will kind of sit like that when we go into robot mode. But for now, we're just going to leave it up like this. I also want to mention I did tighten a fair bit of stuff on this guy, including the hinges up here and down here for this double hinged strut just to make things kind of stay in place more in robot mode, but it also helps for the transformation because now it's like this instead of flopping around. But anyway, you want to do that. Now you want to unplug the back section here. It kind of tabs in between these gray bits here. So you want to pull up, but you also want to kind of push in so that you can push this apart because these bits kind of hook together. So do that. Then this will swing out. And then this little gray hinge, so a double hinge, you want to fold it in like this so that this yellow panel is now facing inward. And then this tab will clip into that yellow clip that was so obvious on the inside of the front wheel. So just clip that in. And same deal on this side. Bring this in and clip that in. And to finish up the hands, or the arms rather, normally the arms are bent like this. You just want to push that down, and then you can actually see the hand in there. You want to fold this down and around so that you can get that hand out, which is oddly kind of tricky to line up properly. Like, just the fingers like to get hooked on the lip for this rear piece, but get the hand free, and then this just comes up and around and folds up against the side of the forearm. And there is one arm done. Same deal here, straighten that out. And then I'm going to bring this little panel down and around to the inside, and there is another arm. And for the getting the torso together, you want to pull this down, and this is something that's very weird to me, because if you look, the robot mode head tucks into this cavity here, so like it can't go missing for the vehicle mode. So why do these heads keep disappearing on listings on this guy? I don't understand it. Also, because of how that head tucks away, there are so many listings for this guy on eBay where you only see photos of the vehicle mode, so it's impossible to tell if the head is still in place because you can't actually see inside enough to tell whether or not the head is in place, because these shoulders and everything are like up around where the head would normally, like where the head is, and like the windshield is up a little bit more around here. So it's so hard to tell if this figure still has his head if you only get vehicle mode pics, and I really don't like that, especially because missing heads are so common. But anyway, you want to hinge this down, because there's this little gray piece in here that's on a double hinge. This hinges down, and this hinges back. But something I wanted to note is this little gray strut here. It actually tabs in at the lower point here. You can just kind of see it. There's this little tab there that goes into this little slot down there. So when you're going into vehicle mode, you want to bring it down and then keep pushing until it clicks. And it'll like snap into place. And that will keep everything nice and lined up going back into vehicle mode. So just make sure you do that if you have this guy and you're transforming him. So anyway, unclick that. And now these bits here will hook into these voids at the bottom of the chest. So you just angle it in and push it down, and it will go in at an angle. The hood front section of the car will not be perpendicular to the torso. It actually angles down slightly. But you do that, keep this up and out of the way, split the obvious legs apart, and now the feet. It's an interesting transformation. You fold this gray piece down, and then you fold this other gray piece in, and there's this little tab here that actually goes underneath the yellow here, and that goes in, and then you just kind of push up a little bit to make sure that tab goes into place. And we'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see what I'm talking about on this foot. So bring this down, bring this in, get this gray tab underneath the yellow, and then push the foot back up so that it closes off that little seam. And that is pretty much it. The only other thing we have to do is take care of the backpack and the head. So to do that, we're going to take the head, fold it up on this strut, and you see it kind of stops here. Just push it down a little bit more, not forcefully, but push it down, and that will get it lined up. And then you just take this and hinge it up, and there are these little grooves right here that will go over these little tabs on the inside of the torso here. So you just want to push that in as best you can. And I like to get my fingers under here and just kind of give it a squeeze to make sure everything is as in as it can be. And this piece will kind of just rest up against the back. Unfortunately, the backpack doesn't really lock in. The only thing that really happens is those bits kind of tab in down there, kind of. And the rest of it is it just sits. Which is another reason why I tightened up those hinges on the back, because I didn't want to have to deal with that piece flopping around a bunch. But there we go. There is Weaponizer Bumblebee in his robot mode, and it does look pretty cool. So the transformation is kind of simple and also a little weird, but it's also pretty satisfying to do, and I like how different some of the engineering is. Like the way the hands and forearms come together, or the way that the feet are actually wrapped around the shins in robot mode, or in car mode, rather. Another aspect I like is the chest. There are two little detail bits you can angle down, which I actually forgot to do. Is take these and angle them down. Come on, angle down. Angle down. There we go. Take these and angle them down, like so. And that changes the shape of the front of the car for robot mode, and it bulks out the look of the chest a bit, which is neat. They were a little loose when I first got the figure, but a little bit of floor polish took care of that problem. Then there's the chest lever that I mentioned before. It's just there so you can reset the gimmick without pushing that gray lever up into Bee's face, but if you look at the sculpting just below the actual car bits, there is this very distinct V shape. Now, this little divot that actually lines up with the lever when it's pulled down. You can kind of see how that lines up. I think this might just be a way to make sure the lever can go down far enough to properly flip those guns back around, but I've started to leave the lever down when the guns aren't deployed, and to be honest, I think it looks better. It adds just a little more yellow to that massive plank of black in the midsection and brings a bit of extra visual interest to Bee's chest area. It also works pretty well with these other bits that you fold down. I don't know, just kind of it dynamics up his chest just a little bit more. Getting back to the gun show, I am so sorry. Now you flip them out by pushing down on Bee's head. The neck plate ends up sitting on top of that button. You can just kind of see it right there, which the engine block or cover was hitting in car mode. It's a pretty clever design. So you push down on Bee's head and the guns whoosh out and spin, and it's great. As is resetting the gimmick. This part alone is fun enough to keep me messing with this guy at my desk several times a day. It's just so, I don't know, kinetic? That is so satisfying. I could just keep doing this. I'm not gonna, but I feel like you can understand where I'm coming from here. It's a lot of motion and activity for very little effort, which is super cool. We do need to move past the gimmick, though, so let's start talking about this robot mode for real now. The proportions are definitely a departure from both the deluxe figures and the show model. He's not just taller, he looks taller. His limbs are thinner and longer, his torso, at least below the car section, looks a bit more vertically stretched. Even his head looks a little bit taller and narrower than the usual Prime Bumblebee design. To be clear, I don't see this as a bad thing. It may not be hyper accurate, but it does look cool. Really cool. This makes me think of Prime Bumblebee after he somehow managed to move up the ladder from Scout to something a bit less scrappy and a bit more formidable. Which isn't to say Bee wasn't formidable before, but it just seems like he's got a little extra juice, you know? Maybe a knight? I don't know, I'm trying to think of like D&D and chess terms at the same time, and that's the best I can come up with at the moment. Point is, this robot mode is definitely a departure for Prime Bee, and I'm definitely not upset about that. He looks really neat like this. The deco is maybe a bit more sparse than I'd prefer, though. Mainly it's the all-gray feet and the almost all-black midsection. There's plenty of sculpted detail there, but a lot of it gets lost thanks to the monotone colors. Of course, this is also something I could address on my own with time and paint if I ever decide it bothers me enough, so there's that. Articulation is something I'm not going to make as many excuses for, though. It's not bad, but there are a few things that bug me. You get a ball-jointed head with a respectable amount of range, but no waist swivel thanks to the transformation. Just one solid piece. There is shoulder rotation, but it can't go back at all, and it isn't able to go all the way up due to the way this is designed. Outward shoulder motion is pretty good. You also get bicep rotation along with elbows that are ever so slightly past 90 degrees. But I kind of wish the outward joint for the forearm locked in place for robot mode, because I usually end up moving that by mistake when I'm trying to spin those biceps or move the elbow. It's very easy to knock that out of place. The hips do things to a reasonable degree, but the forward and backward motion is detented, which makes certain stances a little bit tricky. Really, it makes slight forward and backward angles a pain to pull off, and I tend to do slight forward and backward angles with my posing, especially for display, so yeah, it's kind of annoying. I guess it's more accurate to say the ratchets did make things a little annoying until I add a little bit of floor polish to the joints so that it's easier to cheat them, and that's actually, you can actually see the ratchets right in here, and I just add a little bit of floor polish in there to tighten those up, and it works pretty well actually. And finally, thigh swivels exist, and you get knees slightly under 90 degrees. There's no real foot movement, but I don't really care. What really kind of baffles me is just how much hate I was seeing for this figure back when it was first released, and in the lead up to said release. Maybe it's because of all the big gimmicky toys I've experienced lately, particularly Bumblebees. They're either as articulated as this guy or less so, but I'm perfectly fine with his posability outside of limited shoulder rotation. Complaints about this figure having no paint also strike me as weird, but that could also be because, I mean, look at what we've been getting since. This honestly is an upgrade by comparison, and I really like these two figures. Ultimately, though, I'm not interested in trying to refute other people's accusations against Weaponizer Bumblebee. I like him a lot, and he makes me happy, and that's really all that matters in the context of how I personally feel about this toy. I might not feel as enamored with him if I'd paid the 50 or 75 or higher I've seen him listed for, but I ended up spending around 20, 25 bucks on this guy, and at that price I feel like I might have underpaid by a decent amount. Granted, he does normally come with a gun. It's one of Bumblebee's little two-barrel blaster things, and this figure did not come with that, because it was just this, but he's got giant Gatling guns that pop out of his shoulders. I don't think he also needs the single arm blaster. So if you like what you see or have seen here and want to track down Weaponizer Bumblebee of your own, I'd say absolutely go for it. He's a big, beefy, fun toy that feels good to mess with and has a really satisfying gimmick. I seriously, whenever I have this guy at my desk, which is usually before I end up doing a video, I keep new figures at my desk to mess around with. I just want to keep doing this. I'll transform him every now and then because that's also interesting and satisfying, but this alone just is so satisfying, and it does make me think I do want to clip off that little gray piece. It's not as bad in person as people seem to make it out to be, but it also doesn't really need to be there. So this is just so satisfying to do over and over again. I legitimately really really like that silly little gimmick. It is a lot of fun. By all means, chime in down below and let me know what you think of this guy. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and fingers crossed this approach to videos ends up working out so I don't have to either keep testing out other methods or revert back to the old stuff that resulted in 45-minute long or longer videos all the time. We'll see.